Truth, lies, shenanigans.
All right. So this past week was election day in the U.S., and Republicans swore up and down they were going to take the House and Senate by a landslide, what they call a red wave. And guess what? Never happened. Matter of fact, the numbers from Politico last night confirmed that the Dems have won the Senate. And actually, the House of Representatives still undecided, but leaning towards Republican, having a slight majority. So, of course, given Repubs were expecting to have a significantly look at Wakanda Forever from Lizzie. Given that the Republicans were expecting a significantly better performance, they started blaming who else but Trump. So, Mayor Patrick, I'll start with you. Is this better than expected turnout? Sort of a referendum on Trump? Is it a referendum on Supreme Courts and reproductive rights? Or as Biden put it, it's the fight for democracy as a whole. So I'm going to start with you.
Yeah. So great question. And first, I think it's important to put everything in some context because you look at these midterm elections. These term elections are always losers for the party in power, and it
Historically,
just
yep.
typically the party who's in the White House will lose about 40 or 50 seats. So this time, in the Senate, we may be poised to gain a seat depending on what happens in the Georgia runoff in December in the Senate, and then in the House, we may be the Republicans are probably going to gain a few seats, enough to get a majority. They're only currently behind by about 4 seats in the House, so it's not hard for them to get a majority at this
Right,
point.
it's a
It's
small
probably going to be a
majority
slim
anyway.
majority, right?
Yeah.
Slim majority at the best. So yeah, but to answer your question, I think there's a lot of things that had to do with that. I think certainly the Dobbs decision in the Supreme Court was a big factor because it really kind of showed what the Republicans stand for, and that one of the things that they stand for is taking away the rights of women, and to just highlight that so close to the election. And the Democrats, it gave the Democrats an opportunity to go out and talk about that the rights of women are not safe with the Republicans leading our country, and really to focus on that. So it gave the Democrats a strong talking point. Certainly Trump being out there, and not just Trump being out there, but all the candidates that Trump is supporting was supporting in this election.
They
People
were
like
loud and
Mehmet
clear.
Oz, who, yeah, I know we're going to talk a little bit more about Mehmet Oz, but there were just these candidates out there that supported basically, the big lie, supported the idea that Joe Biden lost the 2020
Election
election
deniers, yep.
when there's absolutely no evidence for that. People see that, and people don't like extremism on either side. But when you have a somebody saying that basically the last election, the legitimately elected president who's in the White House is not supposed to be there, that our democratic process doesn't work in that way, that that really does show a level of extremism that we've really never seen in this country before, at least not in many years. So people reacted to that, and that was what we saw last week.
So you're saying it's leaning more towards saving democracy.
Yeah, and I mean, just Trump being out there and Trump highlighting the fact that and the candidates representing Trump were just highlighting the fact that he was a threat to democracy.
Yeah, and then those MAGA, Biden keeps referring to these MAGA extremists. So yeah, just kind of getting away from those MAGA extremists. What do you think, Liz?
Kanye is included in the MAGA extremists. Gotta bring
Your
him up.
your boy Kanye.
Yeah.
Your boy Kanye. No, I mean, I agree. I agree wholeheartedly, with Patrick on several points that he made. One, Patrick, is a mayor in College Park, Maryland, as we all know, and the governor of Maryland is Larry Hogan, who's Republican, and he has called out repeatedly Donald Trump for the Republicans not doing what they need to do to overwhelmingly take over the Senate, to have this race as close as it is in the House, And so that's one, Republican who's like, hey, I'm going to start holding people accountable. But it's also been amazing to see, like, the Republican Party, as it is wont to do, implode again. Because even though you have Larry Hogan calling out Trump, Trump is now turning on everybody who didn't follow him,
Of
who
course,
didn't vote for him. He's even turning on DeSantis in
well, I mean,
Florida.
that was expected, right?
He's definitely turned on Mitch McConnell, who, once again, I appreciate the fact that he is still the Senate minority leader. All right. So, he's turning on, Mitch McConnell, saying he's responsible for this, he's responsible for that. So they're now sitting back, they're taking notes, they're reassessing what's going on, and they're blaming each other. The infighting has been great to see. But I also think it's a true testament to what we've been saying all along, what we talked about in last week's episode, in that voting is important, not just for the general election, but every time an election comes up, voting is important, whether it be, at the federal level where you're voting for president, or you're voting for a member of Congress or the Senate, or if you're voting for your community. I mean, even in the state of Maryland, there was some pretty key turnarounds as it related to the first Black Attorney General for the state of Maryland, the first female comptroller for the state of, like, these are things
The
that
first Black governor.
matter.
First Black governor, yeah.
And it's one of those things where you have to get in the habit of voting. Don't just think about, okay, I got to vote for president every 4 years. You have to vote for your interests. And one more thing that Patrick talked about as it relates to Georgia. And, so now Georgia, has this runoff, right, coming up.
Yep.
But the interesting thing about Georgia is it really exposed a lot of women voters, particularly a lot of white female feminist voters. Because remember, it wasn't too long ago that everyone was up in arms, particularly women, up in arms about Roe v. Wade being overturned by the Supreme Court, women's rights or whatever. But then with this election on Tuesday, or liberal women, white feminists or whatever, for the most part, especially in a key state like Georgia, overwhelmingly voted for the conservative white Republican, especially when it comes to governor for that state, right? Kemp versus Stacey Abrams. And so you have a lot of hypocrisy going on, a lot of loud talking, as they say in the South, but not a lot of action. And
But do you think they showed out more for Kemp or for the Senate candidates? Brian Kemp being the one who went up against, sorry, for our listeners, the one who went up against Stacey Abrams for governor.
I think,
Georgia.
well, I think it's separate issues. I think it's separate votes. I think they didn't want to show out for a Black woman being in control of the state of Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's still this idea that even though, they may say bad things sometimes,
mm-hmm.
this is still where we're going to follow because, my husband or my daddy or my brother might be a white male conservative. So there's a lot of underlying issues there with the feminists in this country and how they don't come through on a lot of the noise that they make when they don't get their way.
Yeah. Let's go to Micah.
Look, this is what happens when actions meet consequences, right? The Republican Party played a wild hand with Donald Trump, and for a while it was really working. But then they realized, hey, the calls come from inside the house, and and you can't, like, he was such a chaotic presence that the Republicans, the ones who are really in charge, are not dumb. They're not dumb
ones that are
at
really
all.
in charge.
Mitch McConnell is not a dumb person,
okay.
right? But those of his ilk, right?
I mean,
I'm not talking about
say something
Boebert.
different. I don't know. I might.
I'm talking about like people like Boebert and Marjorie Taylor Greene, and like the wackos, right? The wackos.
Wacko.
Wacko.
Boebert, who could still potentially lose in Colorado.
Yeah.
Who could still
Yes.
potentially lose in Colorado.
And I think the I think the infusion of Trump brought out the worst of the Republican Party, because he made it okay to not be ashamed to be, a bigot. And for a while, like, the country was kind of like in a Cold War where it's like, yeah, we know bigots exist, but you just keep your bigotry over there, and we're just going to do our thing. But
That's true.
because of
I can
that,
see that.
because of that explosion,
Cold War
and
bigotry.
right, like it, and we felt it. We really did. And I think that was the straw that finally broke the camel's back to get younger people out to vote. You can't just say women, you can't have an abortion anymore. Like, you can't do you can't have bodily autonomy. Like, that's crazy. That's crazy. You can't you can't and it's a slippery slope, man. Once you start taking rights away, or not even taking, once you start saying, "Oh, well, states' rights." Well, what else happened because of states' rights? The Civil War, because certain states wanted the right to own slaves,
Own slaves. Absolutely.
and
Preach,
you
brother,
can't.
preach.
I'm just saying, you can't. People aren't going to take that. People are not going to take that, especially because this younger pool of voters is leaning more center left to liberal. They're the largest voting bloc, and you can't, like, you can't. I know some Republican people, and I tell them, if you I notice I didn't say I'm friends with certain Republicans. I know some Republican people, and I tell them, I said, look, your party. I know plenty of people who have center right to conservative views, but your party comes off as so bigoted and racist, you're never going to get those people.
And
And
misogynist.
And the problem is the
Absolutely.
entire party.
right,
It's not like just individuals. It feels like
right,
it feels like it's an attack from the entire party. And they're just because
exactly.
the ones that say are moderate, right? Then they should be speaking out,
They
about.
really should.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to consider them, otherwise, I have to assume that the entire party is bigoted. I mean, I have
Right.
to assume that because they're not
Bigoted,
speaking out about it.
homophobic, misogynist, racist, like all of it. All of it.
All of the
That's
isms.
how
All of the
that's
isms.
how they present themselves. That's how they present themselves. And if we want to still be under the guise of, oh, the United States is a melting pot, well, we're not really melting.
Mm-mm.
We're going back to
Yeah.
our corners. And so
And I think
the Republicans will never own up to that.
yeah, this whole idea in I think in the 2018 and 2020 elections that Hispanic voters are going to be going more towards Republicans, that seems to have been repudiated in this
Good.
2022 election. So
Mm.
it's a lot of the districts that they thought were going to that were going to be swayed by that. And it was never really that there was never a majority, and people were never saying there was going to be a majority of Hispanic voters. It's just a slight sway of some of the Hispanic voters to Republicans. And of course, Hispanics are not monolithic, and nobody should say that they're all think the same or anything. But it seems that trend is reversing.
Awesome. So, Robbie, you had some thoughts.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's great to go around the horn and hear what people are saying because, like when Fox News all week or for the last couple of weeks, the narrative has been this red wave is coming, this red tsunami is coming. It's the red splash at best, not even. What I really enjoyed seeing north of the border was
I'd say pink splash.
Pink.
Oh,
man.
Yeah, like when your MAGA hat and your white robes get thrown in the wash together, you get a pink splash.
Your white robes and mag.
Great analogy.
There you go. I like it.
What I enjoyed seeing north of the border, though, was several states that moved to enshrine abortion protection in their constitutions, because this was just a ghastly attack on body autonomy. And north of the border, that was just terrifying to see. So I'm glad to see that was kind of stayed off and that people are bucking up against it. But Liz and Micah were saying, just as far as young voters coming out, I know that they've turned out in record numbers. This was the second highest turnout of young voters in 30 years. So that's pretty impressive. It's they're hearing the message and they know that they need to organize. So that speaks well for the future of your democracy. And to see that the election deniers are not going to be in charge and leading the way for the next election, that makes me happy too. So I have some hope for your democratic process. I absolutely have some hope for your democratic process. And unfortunately, because of American culture and media that trickles north of the border very quickly with the internet and media as quickly as it moves, hopefully it'll usher in some common sense with some of the people who have drunk the Kool-Aid on this side of the fence. Yeah.
Nice. So I wanted to bring up John Fetterman and Mehmet Oz because we were talking about it. So Mehmet Oz got the endorsement from Donald Trump, and then his friend, the woman that made Dr. Oz's career, Oprah Winfrey, not only didn't endorse him, but came out in support of his rival, John Fetterman. So does this mean Oprah has more political power than Trump at this point, Lizzie?
I don't think so. I mean, Oprah is Oprah. I think people take her a lot with a grain of salt. And, Oprah has had her own scandals over the past few years. So she doesn't have the same fans that she did like 5, 10 years ago. My whole big thing was, I think Dr. Oz, like many of the Republicans who initially we thought were going to be a part of the red wave, told on himself, repeatedly kept telling on himself, and he kind of, ran a dirty campaign. The thing, and I'm not, from the state of Pennsylvania, I'm a Washingtonian, born and raised, but as it relates to Dr. Oz, I just kept looking at people or talking to people and saying, first and foremost, this is a man who got on TV and steadfastly told the world, the public, that he does not wash his chicken before he cooks it. So he can't be trusted. He
Does
can't be
not watch
trusted.
his chicken.
From that alone, he cannot be trusted, in my opinion. But he has all of these. I mean, he was at some point, he was a COVID denier, didn't really, wasn't advocating for vaccines. Like, he wasn't working in the best interest of the people. And I think folks started to realize that and see that and think about what Donald Trump was. Dr. Oz, like Trump, a TV personality. That's not what we need in politics. That's not what we need.
Yeah. Somebody was telling me I want to vote for. I want actually somebody who used to be a host on this show was telling me that they were hoping that The Rock runs for president.
No.
For what?
No.
For what?
No.
I'm just curious how y'all feel about it.
He can run a marathon, but he doesn't need to run.
No, he can't. No, he can't. He's way too big to run a marathon.
What do
Get
you
out
think,
of
Patrick?
Come
I mean, well,
on.
let me ask you this, Patrick. I
No.
do want to ask you this about the future of the Republican Party. So, we have 2 years. Okay, so we have the Senate. We might lose a slim majority in the House, but in 2 years we're looking at president again. And do you want Biden to run again? Do you feel that it would be a good thing for him to run again, or is there someone else in mind that you think would do well? Say, for example, like The Rock.
I don't know anything about The Rock's political views, to be honest,
Those
or his
are
leadership
options.
skills. Yeah. I will say, so I think that I mean Biden has gotten a good record so far. I think
Okay.
he's done a good job. He's gotten a lot of accomplishments. There are some challenges that he has, certainly, which all the economic stuff, the inflation, that's something that anybody would be dealing with, and
Right
nobody
now,
really
yep,
has any good
absolutely. It was a bubble ready to bust. So it just, I mean, particularly after the pandemic, it's not surprising
Also, Biden
inflation's.
will be 81 years
That's my
old
concern. So that's why
when
I'm
the
Yeah.
asking.
next election comes.
Yeah.
A lot of, and people
And
need
it's
to
showing in
recognize this.
his. I think it's showing in his.
Oh, in his cognitive cognitive skills and his speech,
I
all
think
of
it's
that. And
clear.
that's not his fault.
It's not his
That's not
fault.
his
It's just
fault.
showing.
We
Yeah.
age. That's what happens to humans. But I think it's something that we need to pay attention to with a lot of people that we have in office, whether it be the president, whether it be our congressmen, senators, whatever. A lot of them are older, in the 80s. We have to start getting some new voices
Yeah.
into
Yeah.
our government. These are antiquated people with antiquated ideas who cannot relate to how the country is progressing.
Come on,
So I mean,
Patrick.
Yeah.
I don't want
No,
Biden to run.
Buttigieg did
I,
it. You could do it, Patrick. Let's go.
I don't want that job.
But go ahead,
I still remember. I still remember the Onion headline when Obama became president. There was an Onion headline that said, "Nation gives country's worst job to a black man."
That's what we do in America. That's what we do in America. Give it to the black man. Give it to the black man.
But I mean, I hear that, and I do think that we need to be developing and fostering new leadership, younger leadership,
We do.
and
Absolutely.
fostering that for the next. But I think in this case, I think Biden people know him, and people I think people like him as a person, and I think I'm mostly concerned about the alternatives in 2020.
That's the problem. Like, who are
and
we looking at?
But
right,
that's why we
right.
we
Well,
have 2 years. That's why we need to get started now.
Mhm.
That's why we need
yeah,
to get
yeah,
started now. I mean, again, he's going to be 81 years old. Poor Joe Biden. Hunter Biden is dragging him through the ringer. We don't know where his emotional state is going to be in 2 years with that wayward son of his. Like, it's just it's time to pass the torch on to someone who's younger and more progressive and who can attract Gen Z to be a part of the democratic process and voting.
yeah.
So who is it,
I
though?
hear that, but I also think that Biden. I think that we need to be thinking about that for the next time. But
Mhm.
I do
And
think
it's
that
hard to get rid of an
Biden
incumbent.
has another 4 years. Yeah.
There's a value to an incumbent. So,
Right. The biggest thing is going to be to beat Donald Trump or
DeSantis.
DeSantis or whoever else they
Well,
come up with.
I saw, and as it relates to Donald Trump, I saw something this week. I think it was on CNN or Washington Post that his children don't want him to run in 2024, and they said that they will not be a part, of another Donald Trump campaign and or White House. So that's very interesting.
I think
Yeah,
this
because
midterms have eliminated him.
you can't do your dirty work in politics, right? Like you got to be a skilled hand to do dirty work in politics. And know that family, like they make their money like under the table, shady deals and
Mhm.
stuff like that.
Mhm.
Politics
And
is
they were
like shine the light
exposed.
on all that stuff.
Yeah, they
Right,
were exposed.
Yeah,
Which is
and
what
they should
happened.
stick. They should make their money, whatever, do whatever. I mean, they're shady dealings, all this stuff that family has done in business. That they should just stick to that and let other people run the country.
Yeah.
Which is why they're being
Stop
It's
investigated.
about
electing.
time.
You
It's
need
about
to
time the
stop
kids are waking
electing
up to that
TV
fast.
stars.
What'd
Stick
you
with
say?
your movie stars. Stick with your movie stars in politics. Stop electing TV stars.
Like The Rock.
Like The Rock.
Like The Rock.
I will not be
who
voting
I
for
would
The
vote
Rock
for
if I
is
can
Mark
help it.
Cuban. I like Mark Cuban if he were to run. I know he was thinking about it in the last one. I would vote for him. I like Mark Cuban.
I think Rob and Neo are just advocating for the bald agenda here. That's what all this Rock stuff is. That's
No to Mark Cuban as well. Come on, we need people who
We do
one
need some.
aren't
We
necessarily
need good people.
billionaires, but also who have been a part of community service, who've been a part of politics, and know how to speak to the people and its needs. And Mark Cuban has had his own scandals with being the owner and the president of the Dallas Mavericks. So
Yep.
no
All
Mark
right, we
Cuban.
got some comments online. Robin Johnson, Dr. J says Dems have to stop voting emotionally. Republicans vote the ticket because they support party ideals. It clearly doesn't matter to them who runs. And then Tracy Gore says we have enough cartoon characters in office already.
Exactly.
All right. So that was a great discussion. Great discussion, guys. But yeah, I think that it's good to see that we've at least got the Senate. Well, I keep saying we. the Democrats at least have the Senate. You
The
know, have a
country, no, the country. We, the country,
the
at least
country.
has a Senate.
There we
Yes.
go. I like that. And then you know, the House is at least a slim majority. So actually, it's
Well,
still
and
possible. It's still possible that Dems get the House. Unlikely,
And
but
I
possible.
appreciate where we are now because remember for last week, when we did like the pre, midterm election, we were not thinking that it was going to be a great turnout, that we were going to make any type of progress. We were thinking the red wave was going to take over. So I at least appreciate where we are right now.
Yep.
I really do.
All right. So that's it for that.
Truth, lies, shenanigans.